Hello, Danaher. So the first one that I read and looked over was Humility as Rich Earth. The first few pages, the author speaks on humility and many definitions that people had for being humble. So just doing the little things. Like the example that he gave was a wife had cancer, the husband wasn't doing a lot of work, so then before she came home from the hospital, he painted the room, and she thought that was very humble of him. Other examples of being humble is coming across as equals, denying your own case in order to serve others. I read all these descriptions, none of them like really clicked for me. I wasn't like, that's humility, like I didn't really resonate with any of that really. But I think it's because, and they talked about a little about this in the book, was that if you are asked if you're humble and you say yes, then that's basically saying that you're not, because a humble person would never admit that they are humble. And it's sort of like a paradox in that way, that if you ever admit that you're humble, then you're not, and if you say that you're not, then you could be being truthful and saying you really are humble. So I think humility is really in your actions, because it's not like a question that you could really answer yes or no to, because I think that someone who's truly humble would never admit or think or say that they are humble. And I think that's one of the reasons why none of these definitions really clicked for me, because I've never really thought about humility, because like I feel like even thinking about it is just like saying that you're not humble. But I think out of all of those, like when I was trying to think about it, I believe that humility or being humble is to put others first and admit when you're wrong. They say it's very humble when you do something and you admit that you're wrong, and that's very humble, or to always put others first. And then later I think they talk about, or maybe it's in another book, that being humble isn't always putting yourself down. It's like lifting up others up. So you don't have to like constantly talk bad about yourself in order to seem humble. They also stated in the book about humility is like some people put themselves down to appear humble, but it's really to get praise and boost their own ego. Because some people do good things for the reward of doing good things, and other people do good things just because it makes them feel good. They don't need praise. I think that was one of the things that Jesus talked about too. Like, if you're doing something good, you don't need to boast about it. Like, it should feel good from you. And if you're doing something good and you want praise from it, then you're not really doing it for the right reasons. It's interesting to see that research shows that humble people tend to have accurate perceptions of their abilities and accomplishments. Nothing more, nothing less. Humble people understand their strengths and their limitations and live easily with both. And I wrote down, that sounds very anxiety-free. And also I wondered, they did research on it, but where did they find these humble people? Because it's unhumble to admit that you're humble. So I just thought it was funny that they just said that you shouldn't admit to being humble if you're humble, and then they found a bunch of humble people to do this research on. Another quote that I liked was, humility allows us to accept our average looks, middle-income skills, and tendencies to get irritable when stressed. Humility does not excuse poor efforts or irresponsibility, but it helps us accept our natural limitations and understand that in weaknesses we gain wisdom and empathy towards others. There was an example about a girl. She was like from a small college, was really good at volleyball, and it wasn't until she got dropped from the team that she earned humility. And I think that's one of the things. From our weaknesses do we gain wisdom. I think it's always in, when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the trials and tribulations, do you actually gain wisdom from it all? They say that God doesn't give you what you can't handle, and you're always supposed to learn from whatever trials that you're in. And I feel like that's kind of a little bit what the quote was saying. You know, being humble doesn't mean that you're Mother Teresa. You know, you can be a normal person and be humble. This article shows me is that humility can be learned, but when it is learned, it is initially a painful experience, like that girl who played volleyball. Humility is thinking highly of others. Humility is not thinking lowly of yourself. I believe those who shoot themselves down in order to be humble are those who are doing it for compliments. That is if they know that is if they believe that they don't actually suck. I think some people are just really used to self-deprecating humor or just always putting themselves down, and they don't actually fish for compliments. They just think that they're not that great, and that's that. So the next article or book that you had cited was Radical Discipleship. So in the beginning, it talks about this lady that made a computer network for people, and then all of a sudden a student emailed her like a porn website or something like that, and she was wondering what ethical place she should go through. Like, should she ignore the email or should she confront it? And I think since she made the server, she works for her Christian university where she made the server, so obviously they're not supposed to be looking at pornography, and I think most universities have all those websites blocked anyway. I know normal Christian colleges do, so I don't know, I feel like that was kind of, and they talked about it like more in that chapter, was about like whether or not she should do anything about it. But I think it's obvious, like she's in a position of authority where that's her job, and obviously that's something that shouldn't be happening, so she should shut it down. Like, she made the network, she can make it so those websites are blocked, and just email them and say, hey, thanks for bringing this up to me, like I'll make sure that those websites don't work. You know, you don't have to add them out or anything, you can just subtly let them know that that's why that's down. I like this quote. It says, human communication is not an individual enterprise, but a collective activity. I think this is, I really like that because it's kind of what I believe that you've been trying to say all semester, is that communication goes two ways. You know, we're always adapting and changing because everyone's adapting and changing. Therefore, communication is. So it's never stagnant. It's an activity. Something that they talked about in that article that I found sad, troubling, but also not surprising was that 173 journalists were murdered between 1987 to 1997, and just in Latin America, which is like, you know, not even the whole world, just a small section of it. And, well, I guess Latin America is not that small, but you get what I'm saying. And just for trying to publish the truth. And I know in some countries, when you can't really speak your truth or you don't really know what's happening, you go to the papers for the truth. And those journalists are always trying to seek justice for what the government isn't explicitly saying. So radical discipleship calls us away from the worldly authority and towards the authority of God. Which, I mean, when it comes down to forever in my soul, I would much rather believe in the authority of God than police or, you know, the government, because that's just the here and the now. Like, God is forever. So it makes sense why you would want to go towards the authority of God. I like this quote too. Radical communication recognizes that all human communication is symbolic action. We act with our tongues, our ears, our hands, our eyes. We act when we listen. And I like that because I know not a lot of people listen. Like, they hear you, but they don't listen. But you act when you listen. So if you're really listening to someone, then you'll act after that. And I think that's a really cool quote. We act with our tongues, our ears, our hands, our eyes. When we act, we listen. I said for this one, this quote. Our words, like our silence, can foster life and death. Our symbolic action breathes heaven or hell in the world. When communication is badly misconstructed, people can literally die, which I found just a really intense quote. And then after that, I laughed at the next quote, which is communication is like plumbing for every community. It should deliver fresh water and flush out the waste. I just thought that was a really funny analogy for communication, was plumbing. I mean, but after they explained it, it was pretty accurate. This book also speaks on truth-telling, privacy, and representation. So truth-telling is when you tell the truth and when you might justify a lie. I was actually watching Hannah Montana today, and she was caught in a lie. And she told a bunch of second graders that sometimes it's okay to lie. Like, your parents lie to you because they say that you could be president of the United States, but likely you won't be, and that's a lie. And it's funny because she's telling that to a bunch of second graders. But sometimes you can justify a lie. Like, some parents justify lying to the kids about Santa Claus. There's one. 'Tis the season. The next one is privacy. When to maintain confidentiality and when to reveal what we know. Sometimes it's not always the best to reveal something to someone, such as a surprise birthday party. You're kind of lying to them to try to get them to a location, but it's not like a bad lie. Something like that. And then representation, preserving relationship is often depends upon the management of deception. Sometimes even lying is for its very substance. And then the article talks about grace. I feel like I should mention that since my name is Grace. A lot of what I believe in Christianity. What they were saying is grace is not judging others and treating others how you would like to be treated, which is for Christianity, for me, is a lot of like not judging others, being the best version of yourself, and just loving everyone. You know, Jesus is for love and not hate. Okay, next book, Practicing Forgiveness. So there's 5 reasons to forgive. Forgiveness may repair broken relationships. So say that your best friend did something to you, you forgive them to be friends again. I know I've done that many times. Forgiveness may restore individual well-being. Sometimes someone might hurt you really deeply. I read a book once, and this guy murdered the main character's mom, and she went to prison to visit him and just said, "I forgive you." And having that be lifted off of you can help your well-being. To not hold on to something so powerful as like hatred or revenge. Forgiveness can be an expression of continued love and commitment. So like if you're in a relationship and you forgive someone that you're married to, that means that you still want to be in that relationship with them. Forgiveness recognizes behavior. I can't pronounce. And then forgiveness can restore relational justice. So sometimes you forgive someone, or you ask for forgiveness for someone that's hurt you. Say you had a boyfriend who never admitted that he cheated on you, and then later after you broke up, he did. That would make you feel like you finally got justice for the pain that you went through. There's also a dark side of forgiveness. Sometimes people don't actually mean what they're saying, and when you find out, it really hurts. Or people apologize for the wrong thing, like, "I'm just sorry that I'm smarter than you," something like that. There's also conditional forgiveness, like, "I forgive you if you'll do something in return," that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiving too easily can be bad too. Say you're in an abusive relationship and you just keep forgiving him because even after he punches you in the face. That's bad. Then there's the Worthington Pyramid model. First you recall the hurt. You remember the transgressions objectively as possible. You empathize with the offender. Try to humanize them. Think of their perspective. And then there's the altruistic gift of forgiveness, which is remember like a time someone forgave you, then it makes you more willing to forgive that other person. Commit publicly Either tell your therapist, a friend, write in a journal the reasons why you forgive this person, and then hold on to that forgiveness. Don't forgive someone or tell them that you forgive them and then take it back. That's not how forgiveness works. Fun. Good relationship. So they start off with a really bold claim, I believe. They said that we are moral beings. Social justice is embedded in this basic assumption. Inherently in the idea of justice is that one behavior is better than others, and most significantly, that all people have the right to be treated in a particular moral ways. And they said an example of, they were basically saying that the Declaration of Independence is a moral document. I just feel like right off the bat, they were just like throwing it out there. So according to this book, morals develop over time. It's an essential part of a personal relationship also. Early on, when you learn morals from your parents. Like your parents will say, don't hit your sister, please share with your brother, stuff like that. You can also see that parents have taught their children maybe the opposite of morals. It might be because I've been watching Criminal Minds too much, but parents have a big role into why their kids do what they do. It's like many times it's like the father was abusive to the son and that's why he became a murderer, or the brother was teaching his younger brother how to murder people, stuff like that, and they don't know anything different. If you've grown up with that, you don't know anything different. Like I grew up with divorced parents. Thinking of my parents together is just strange. Thinking of not having two houses is just strange. So stuff like that. The way you grow up is how you perceive morals. It also says that all relations have a commonality. There are rules and conditions, and when broken, the relationship changes, or at least is reevaluated. A relationship always consists of at least two people. And I thought that was interesting because they were talking about how different people define a good relationship. Like loyalty is better. Some people value money over everything else. So it was really just how you were raised. But if that trust is broken, whether or not that other person realizes how important it is to you, you do reevaluate the relationship. So the next one is listening and the 4 horsemen. So there's 7 signs of poor listening, and I wanted to write this down because I think listening is so important. It's been a topic of a couple of these books. So one of them is judging others too quickly or too harshly, jumping to premature conclusions, responding thoughtlessly, basing opinions of others on first impressions, failing to set aside one's biases and prejudices, seeing reality solely from one's own and limited perspective, and focusing on self-centered agendas. Those all sound very bad. And I'm happy to say that I don't think I do that. But I'm not trying to seem not humble. Listening is attending to reality rather than getting caught up in your own narrow, often self-serving view of things. So I feel like a lot of the times you can hear people, but you're not listening. I have dissociative disorder, which basically means I black out, I don't pay attention a lot of the times. A lot of times people have to repeat themselves, and I feel really bad. There's been a lot of times people have had, full-on conversations with me, but I've just never responded because I can't hear them because of that condition. And I feel really bad about that. And it's all about what they said. It's being in the present, being in the reality of what's happening. And I have trouble doing that. Another thing I wrote down was when we truly listen to God, often through a Christian community, we begin to choose life, healthy relationships over death, destructive relationships. So when you're really listening to God, really in your relationship with Him, you'll have healthy relationships. I wrote down the 4 most marriage-destroying habits, just so I could remember them for the future. 1 is criticism, 2, contempt, 3, defensiveness, and 4, stonewalling. Those all make sense. So the last source that I have, I found this article on creating good relationships. It included responsiveness, relationship quality, and interpersonal goals. People not only can create the type of relationships they want, those characterized by high responsiveness and continuously high quality, but they can create responsiveness and high quality relationship in others. So if you're willing to put in the work, you can get good results. That's what I got from that whole article. Other than that, I just want to say thank you for having me in your class, and I hope to see you next semester. Bye, Danaher.